Hey guys, let's get real about some thoughts that you might be having about your wife and that are driving you up the wall. Maybe you're thinking she's OCD, always obsessing over the smallest things, or that she's too emotional, crying over the stuff that really doesn't even matter, or the goalpost is always moving. I can never win with her no matter what I do. See, I hear these things all the time from the men that I coach, and I get it. It feels frustrating, like you're stuck in a losing battle. I used to have those exact same thoughts about my wife, and it nearly cost me my marriage. But here's what I've learned from working with hundreds of dismissive avoidant men. Those thoughts might be more about you than they are about her. If you're a dismissive avoidant, your nervous system is wired to see her emotions or her needs as a threat. And from a young age, you might have learned that these emotions aren't safe to express. Growing up, I was shut down every time I tried, so I conditioned myself to suppress them. That wiring helped you survive back then, but now as an adult, it's sabotaging your marriage. So when she's upset or asking for more connection, you label her as too much to protect yourself because closeness feels overwhelming. For example, when she's emotional, you might think that she's overreacting, but really she's craving safety and connection. Things that your avoidance makes it hard for her to feel. Or when you say the goalpost keeps moving, it's because that you're pulling back instead of stepping up to lead with the grounded masculine energy, leaving her feeling insecure. So she keeps asking for more to feel close. And the truth is, her OCD or her emotional behavior is often a reaction to your withdrawal. It's a cycle that you're both trapped into. So let's break this cycle down so that you can see exactly what is happening. If you're a dismissive avoidant, chances are that you're married to an anxious partner, right? The opposites often attract in relationships. And this dynamic is a classic one. So here's how it plays out. When you feel overwhelmed by her emotions or her needs, your instinct is to shut down or pull away. Maybe you walk out of the room, give her the silent treatment, or you tell her that she's being too much. But that withdrawal makes her feel rejected and makes her feel unsafe. So she starts chasing after you. Maybe she gets more emotional, asks more questions, or keeps pushing for connection. But the more that she chases, the more threatened that you feel. So you pull back even further. It's like a dance where you're both stepping on each other's toes and neither one of you knows how to stop. See, I lived this for 15 years in my own marriage. We were stuck in this loop of frustration, guilt, rage, and we almost got divorced because of it. I kept blaming her, thinking that she was the problem until I realized that my avoidance was the root cause. So where does this avoidance come from? So let's talk about your nervous system and how it's been wired since childhood. For many dismissive avoidants, including myself, this pattern started early. Growing up, anytime I expressed my emotions, like crying or saying that I was scared, I was shut down. So maybe some of you guys are told that boys don't cry or stop being so sensitive. Or maybe your parents just ignored you. And over time, you learned that emotions were unsafe and that vulnerability led to rejection and shame. So, like me, I conditioned myself to suppress them. I'd push those feelings down and act like I didn't care. I'd focus on being independent, and that helped me to survive as a kid. But as an adult, it stopped serving me. Instead, it caused turmoil in my marriage. My wife felt disconnected. I felt overwhelmed, and we were both just miserable. So your story might be similar. Maybe you were raised in an environment where you had to be the strong one. Or maybe you had a caregiver who was emotionally unavailable, so you learned to rely only on yourself. Now that conditioning became your default, but now it's keeping you stuck in a pit of despair where you feel like you can't win with her no matter what you do. And the good news here is that you can reverse this pattern. It's not too late to change, and the story that you've been telling yourself. The first step is awareness. Start noticing how you react when she's upset. Do you shut down, get annoyed, or walk away? That's your nervous system kicking in, trying to protect you from what it sees as a threat. So instead of blaming her for being too emotional, try this. Pause, take a deep breath, and feel your feet on the ground. Stay present. Then ask her, what do you need to feel safe right now? This small shift does two things. It helps her feel seen and heard, which calms her down, and it starts to break the cycle by showing her that you're not willing to pull away again. But this awareness is just the beginning. To truly heal, you need to dig deeper into the stories that are driving your avoidance. Those beliefs like emotions are dangerous or I can't handle her needs, they aren't the truth anymore. They're the lies that are keeping you trapped in that pit. This pit is where you're filled with guilt, shame, rejection, telling yourself that nothing's ever going to change. Well, if lies are the only thing that are keeping you stuck in this pattern, then the truth must be the thing that sets you free. So let's talk about the truth. So what is the truth then, right? And it's the truth versus the conditioning that I just mentioned earlier. So how do we do that? Well, the truth can only be found in God, and transformation can only be found in the truth. Now, if you said God, you're like, I'm out of this because I don't believe in the God. Yes, I am a Christian. I do believe in a God, but that's not the important part here. The important part is this God, this higher power, this is something that is outside of you, right? We need to be able to view who we are from like a third person angle so that we can analyze how we're acting, when we're getting triggered, when we are getting flooded with these emotions that we don't want to deal with, when we're just suppressing them, when we're numbing out to porn, to alcohol, with video games, with whatever our menu of escape is, right? We need to be able to look at that from an outside lens. And God is a perfect name for who I am as a person. You come up with whatever it is that your name is to make this work, but it's a higher power, something outside of you. So then we get to transformation. What exactly is transformation? We hear this a lot. Transform yourselves. What is that? And so in order to answer that, we need to move down to change versus transformation. Okay. So as you can see here, change, the more you change, you've heard this phrase before, the more you change, the more you stay the same, right? So with this first example here, we're a triangle, right? We hear something on TikTok. We hear some neat tip of how to deal with your relationship. Okay. And then we implement that. And then all we do is invert the triangle. We don't actually change anything. These changes that we're trying to bring into a relationship are all external changes. They're changes that aren't transforming who we are inside. Right? We're still having these strong emotions. We're still shutting down. We're still doing things. So no matter how often we change, we realize we're just staying the same. All we're doing is just pivoting the triangle. Okay? But have you ever had an experience where someone out there, you were giving advice to them and they didn't listen to you and they just keep living this pattern over and over and over again, no matter how many times you tell them? But let's say some random person, something like their hero, for example, tells them the exact same thing. And then they come running to you. It's like, hey, I just learned this really cool thing and it's transformed my life. It's like, I've been telling you that for years. Why did my words mean anything different? Well, that experience that other person went through was an actual transformation. They went from a triangle and then implemented and took to heart what that person was saying and became a square, right? They changed who they were on the inside. And I'm sure you've had experiences before, and I'm sure you've given advice to other people where they took it and transformed who they were. They stopped living in their old patterns that weren't working for them, right? And so the more that we find out what's going on underneath, and the more that we make these internal changes in who we are, the more that we transform and completely become a new person. We're no longer living the change, staying the same cycle. We are becoming brand new individual persons, not even recognizing who we are anymore because we've done this transformation. Okay. From there, this is what it looks like. Each time we make a transformation, a step forward, this is what it looks like. So it's called the pit to peak. Okay. So we are currently in the pit. You are currently in the pit, wondering, how do I stop being an avoidant and how do I move to this new peak, this new secureness, right? So when you're here in the pit, sad little guy, right? You're saying things like, she's too needy. She's always overreacting. She's too sensitive. She's so controlling, right? I can't win with her. The goalpost is always moving. No matter what I do, she's always moving the goalpost on me, right? These are things that avoidants tend to say to themselves and say to their buddies when they're venting about their relationship, right? There's no way that they can win in who they currently are. So what we're stuck into when we tell ourselves the stories, we're stuck in this story, this frame A, right? And until we change the story, and you've heard Tony Robbins say this multiple times, if you've listened to anything he said, change your story, change your life. It's our story is where our answers come from, how we change this narrative about how our emotions are reacting inside of our body. When we are able to change the story and change it to a new frame, move up to frame B, we unlock this transformation I was talking about earlier. We become the secure person. So what is a secure attachment style person? They are someone who knows that they make mistakes, but they don't take it personally. Their wife can rage out all she wants, be in her wild feminine energy, and as a secure person, that has nothing to do with you. It doesn't cause you to feel guilt, feel rejection, feel shame. You don't react with anger, with rage, because you know that you are in your grounded masculine presence, and nothing that she does can alter who you are on the inside. And the same thing goes for her. She wants to be in her chaotic feminine energy, right? Which is flowing. You want to be the riverbanks that guide her in her emotions, right? She can't live in that safe space. She can't feel free to express herself, right? To do her own version of releasing if she doesn't feel safe coming to you because you're her rock, right? So that's what that's what it means to be secure in your grounded masculine presence. All right, so what does this look like on a more in-depth scale? This is the same thing. We still have pit, we still have peak, but now this is kind of blown up, more detailed. So we're going to get into that. This is called the drift, shift, lift and light thing. So let's use an example of your day-to-day scenario. Okay, so you're just living your life, going through life with your spouse, and then all of a sudden something triggers you. And what is a trigger? Well, a trigger is merely, it's not that your partner triggered something in you. It's triggered something that caused you to react this way. Your partner revealed something that was hidden inside of you, something that you have yet to deal with inside of you. So many men have this bucket that they're carrying around with them of unmet with emotions that they're too afraid to look into this bucket and actually deal with. The pain must get so big for them to actually overcome the fear of looking into this bucket of emotions, right? So we get triggered. Something inside of us gets revealed. And then when that happens, we tend to spiral down, right? So this first chevron could be rage, right? The next one could be anger, irritation. And then we move over to guilt, shame, rejection, right? And we just keep on going down this spiral until we find ourselves in a pit. And in this pit, we're wallowing in what could haves and I should haves. We tell ourselves, I should have said this, or I should have done that. I shouldn't have, all these different stories that we're telling ourselves when we're locked in the pit here. And it becomes a pit of despair, right? Nothing's ever going to change. This is where many of you probably find yourself. Nothing's ever going to change. I can't win with my wife. Why am I even trying anymore? Right? And then eventually that gets so tiring of being in that negative mindset that we're like, you know what? I just want to go back to the status quo. Right? I just want to go back to not fighting with my wife anymore, just so we can live in this house healthily, right? And happily. So we start to move over to what we call the false lift. In this false lift, we are trying to get back, as I said, to the status quo. But because we didn't actually make the shift and jump on this lift, nothing actually changes. And so we end up staying on this karmic cul-de-sac for our whole lives unless we make that shift. Right? We come back up to the status quo. We get triggered again. We get enraged. We feel guilt. We feel shame. We're stuck in the pit for a while. And then we get tired of that. We move back up to this false lift. I just want to get back to the status quo. We live our life again for a period of time. And then we get triggered again. And then we just continue this cycle over and over again. And many of you can resonate deeply with this because you've just been living this same cycle, the same pattern with your wife for years now. Right? And in order for us to make this shift that I talked about earlier, the shift is found in the stories and the shift is found in the feelings. Remember that bucket that I mentioned a moment ago? We have to actually look in that bucket and deal with that in order to change this pattern. So let's imagine this. We get triggered again, right? Which means that something inside of us gets revealed. And then as we're falling down here, we become aware that we're triggered. When we become aware that we're triggered, that's when we step outside of ourselves. Remember the God, the higher power? We step outside of ourselves, and instead of falling down all the way to the pit where we are, we stop, and we go like, something here needs to change. Why am I feeling this way? You start asking these type of questions. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I reacting way up here when what happened, I should be reacting like this way? I should be acting with some kind of irritation, mild form of irritation. I shouldn't be enraged, right? I shouldn't also feel this immense sense of rejection or guilt because of what happened. So why am I feeling this way? When we are able to become aware of that, to be able to stop, analyze what's going on, then we can finally start to make this shift. This shift brings us to the lift. This lift brings us to our new peak, right? Our new path, our ever continuing eternal expansion to a new person, right? And this is the goal. This is break out of that karmic cul-de-sac, right? Get to a new peak. And then what happens when you get to a new peak? When you get to a new peak, this is all that happens, right? You start off as a triangle. You stop yourself when you're getting triggered. You heal that wound, that emotion. You pull it out. You pull it out of the bucket. You deal with it. You come to grips with it. You release it in a natural way instead of shutting it down, suppressing it, because it's still there. It's just locked up in your subconscious, right? So, but when we allow it to release that stored up energy inside of us, we move up to a new peak, right? And this is the path. This is the pattern, right? Every new peak we come to is a new eternal expansion. That what's new then becomes numb. What's numb then becomes we fall asleep to it, right? So each time you can experience this many times. So when I was working as a Walmart manager, right, and then I got my air traffic controller job, I ended up tripling my income. And then that new peak that I was, the newness wear off. I became numb to that environment, right? And then when I became numb to that, I fell asleep to it. And I found myself in a new pit, right? It wasn't until I got tired of being in that new pit that I was in that I was like, you know what? I need to get out of this again. I need to continue to expand myself. This is not working for me anymore. And so I transformed from a circle. I got out of that next pit, found myself at a new peak. I became a square, completely transformed myself. And then again, the same cycle continues. What was new becomes numb. What's numb, you fall asleep to. And so we need to wake up in a new pit. And this is the ever continuing cycle of the eternal expansion. When we come out of that pit, we find ourselves in a new peak. We are now a star. We've transformed ourselves again. When we are here at this star, we are a completely different version of the person that started the journey way down here in the pit. New pit, peak, pit, peak, pit, peak. And as we continue to do this, we won't even recognize who we are anymore, right? And that all starts by analyzing every time we get triggered. Instead of allowing those emotions to come through, we make a stop and we analyze them and we heal through them, okay? When we do that, this is another way to look at it, the eternal expansion versus the eternal death. So in life, as you've noticed, you're either growing or you're dying. There's absolutely zero chance you could stay the same. No one stays the same. Life is all built around growth or decay. And so we have a choice to make. Most of us are stuck in this cycle of death and decay, right? This pit that we're stuck in is just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. You've heard of people hitting rock bottom, right? Well, when you hit rock bottom and you continue to live that life, you're going to realize that rock bottom had a basement, right? And so it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. This is why so many men end up wanting to commit suicide, because they just do not see a way out. And I feel so bad for those people. I worked at Celebrate Recovery for 2 years as a leader there, and I got to see so much chaos in other men's lives and help them through that. It was absolutely amazing. Just to give the gift of hope to somebody else could mean the difference between them wanting to commit suicide and staying here and working through this bucket that they're avoiding to deal with. And it was a sad experience, but I was so grateful for being able to do that. So again, eternal expansion or eternal death. The choice is yours, what you want to do. You will if you don't make the choice to grow, then you are by default making the choice to slowly decay to death and into chaos. So the choice now is, when will you begin your transformation, right? You've heard this quote before, that the best time to plant a tree was 25 years ago. Well, the second best time to plant a tree is today, right? So when are you going to decide to begin your transformation? So if that is something that you want to do, we can ask ourselves, what now? So below this video, there's going to be a Google Doc link. That'll tell you, if you want to work with me, how to work with me, right? Now, I'm going to continue to put out free content. Go follow me here, subscribe to the video if you haven't already. But comment your biggest takeaways from watching this video. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. And maybe your comments will turn into a future video for me to post out here. So anyways, thank you for being a part of this little short, brief masterclass on a attachment avoidant and what the process looks like to actually make the healing transformation. You know, again, I'll say it again. The more you change, the more you stay the same. We need to actually transform in here to deal with this bucket that we're carrying around with ourselves on a day-to-day basis, and actually look in it, start taking things out, start healing from these things that we've lodged in this bucket. But it's scary, but we can do it. I believe in you. Have a good day.